Hi, my name is Abby Chan, and I am the co-owner and registered dietitian at Evolve Flagstaff in Flagstaff, Arizona. And today what we're going to be talking about is understanding hunger. I think that this is one of the most important tools as you're taking some first steps towards intuitive eating to start to utilize and understand. Diet culture often tells us to ignore our hunger cues and ignore what our body's telling us, and that we can't trust our body. So this is one really great way that you can start to understand and dive in a little bit deeper to really understand what you need. Also with diet culture gives you very prescriptive eating plans and nutrition plans telling you that you should eat X amount every single day for the rest of your life, when not every day is the same, as you and I both know. What you did yesterday activity-wise, very different. Also, what your levels of stress or how much sleep you got, all of these things are very, very different. And know the activity and the impact of exercise and the impact and the physiological impact for days following exercise may also shift what you need to be eating and how you need to be actually fueling your body so that you are A, able to recover well, but B, also able to, again, start to eat a little bit more intuitively. So here is a hunger scale that I have put together, and it basically goes from a 1 to 10, 1 being totally ravenous, your tank is totally empty, and 10 being beyond full. So for some people, this may even be vomiting full. I find that most people don't really end up on either the 1 range or the 10 range very frequently, and that's generally a good thing. But know that if you do end up in that space often, in either of those spaces often, know that that's totally normal, and this can be a really great tool for you. So let's start to understand how we utilize this a little bit more. And so with this hunger scale, these are all words that I have put on it, but know that everybody is very, very different. Hunger may feel completely different in someone's body as opposed to the person next to them. So hunger may actually feel like stomach hunger. You may actually, some people really do feel kind of like that pit in their stomach, or that urge to eat because their stomach's growling. But I would say that most of my clients and most people actually don't feel that. They actually don't ever feel their stomach grumbling. And that can partially be because either surgical reasons, it could also be because you've ignored it for so long that your body is like, fine, whatever, I give up. So there's a lot of other things that our body's telling us if we start to tap in and listen in. So when you're hungry, you may not feel hunger pangs full, but you may start to feel irritable. You may start to feel dizzy. You may start to feel anxious. You may start to feel cold or warm. Know that all of those things can be really, really good cues that you may be hungry. So I want you to start to utilize this scale and start to identify with what this feels like to you. So let's put it on a scale kind of in this range. And again, 1 being totally ravenous, maybe haven't eaten all day and it's 3 p.m. Or, and I normally find a 1 being basically even beyond the point of hunger. Like it could just be pure fatigue. Like you might even feel nauseous even thinking about food at that point too. So know that all of these things and words and things that I'll be saying that maybe identify with these numbers may not identify with you, but maybe it will strike a chord and you may relate to it. So 1, again, totally ravenous, haven't eaten all day, maybe beyond the point of hunger. A 2 could be what I maybe call as like chips and salsa syndrome. So this is in our house, at least you get home from work and you are ravenous, haven't eaten for hours because you didn't have a snack on you, and you go into the pantry and basically grab anything that you absolutely can get your hands on because you're so hungry. So that may be a 2. A 3 could be maybe somewhere before that where you're like, oh, really, really hungry, really need to eat right now, but maybe I don't need those chips and salsa right now. I can maybe wait to make dinner. A 4, maybe when you first start to feel hungry, when you first start to have those thoughts and ideas around food. A 5 is totally neutral, where you're not even thinking about food. This could be possibly an hour or 2 after lunch, where you just feel really stable, able to focus. Again, you're not thinking about being overly hungry and you're not thinking about being full. You're just kind of not thinking about food. 6 would be where you first start to feel those first symptoms of satiety and maybe fullness. This could be a sense of ease, maybe a sense of like, oh, I feel like I could take a deep breath now. For some people, this is where they put food away. It totally depends. A 7 maybe where you continue eating that food. Maybe you haven't totally put it away, but you're like, okay, definitely full, definitely done, satiated. But if there were a few more bites on your plate, maybe you would choose not to eat them. And then an 8 would be, okay, you had dinner, you ate those few extra bites, and now you're really full. Like maybe you start to get a little bit uncomfortable. This could even, for someone who has maybe been in diet culture for a long time, could maybe start to feel feelings of guilt or shame or things like that of like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that, whatever. 9 would be in the sense of doing that. I kind of call this Thanksgiving or holiday full, where it's like you blew past 6, 7, and possibly 8, and you had that full meal, and then you had dessert, and then you maybe had a little bit more too. So this is where I find that people often start to feel really tired, fatigued. Again, a lot of those feelings of guilt and shame, feeling uncomfortable in their clothes, feeling like they may want to even change their clothes. And then a 10 is, again, to that very extreme end of possibly all of those feelings of the 9, but then also so full that I might be actually vomiting food up or wanting to vomit food up. So again, this is a wide range of where you may fit on the scale at any point in time, and know that this will change every single day. So just because it's noon doesn't mean that you're at a 3 or a 4 and that you want to eat. You may be at a 5 or 6 and totally fine. But the next day you may be at 10:30 a.m., maybe at that 3 to 4 and really, really have to eat. And that can, again, be based on what you either ate that morning or didn't eat, the activity that you did the day previously. So know that it's not just black and white, I'm hungry, I'm full. Know that there's a lot of other things and a lot of other cues that can tell us and give us a lot of insight on where you may lay on the scale. So let's go back to that chips and salsa syndrome place. So for me, it's generally getting home, again, needing that urgency around food is really what I relate to a 2 as also. So that need to have food right then, right there. Blood sugar is pretty low, pretty irritable, and maybe during this time I'm eating chips and salsa, and then I'm also prepping dinner. And so at that point, to when it actually rolls around to dinner time, maybe 30 minutes or an hour later, I'm going to eat that dinner because I spent all this time making it, so I might as well have it, right? And then what can happen, not always, but what can happen is because you're so hungry and in that very urgent state, you may eat so quickly from your appetizer of chips and salsa and then dinner that you may blow past again all of those other previous signals of actually being satiated. And you may end up at an 8, to where, again, it's maybe that full, could be some of that feelings or ideas of loathing or guilt, etc. And what I find is that when people have those ideas and feelings of guilt and shame around their food, or, oh my gosh, I'll get back on the track tomorrow and I'll do better tomorrow, then what happens is they end up restricting. Sometimes this isn't always intentional, but I often do find that they end up restricting, and then you wind up back in that same space that you were in the day before, in that 2 range, very urgent, very hungry, and in that very needy state. So what we can do is maybe we can start to even close this window a little bit, or even shift that big swinging from one extreme to the other, and start to just hone it in just a little bit. So with those first feelings of hunger, I like to tell people that, and especially if you've been in diet culture for a long time and been ignoring it, I often tell people this is really when you need to start eating, especially if it's finally registering that you're hungry. So in that 3-4 range, this is when a time that you need to start eating and start to think about food and start to notice some patterns around these things. Generally, not always, but generally if you're in a 4 state, you're not super urgent, your blood sugar is not tanking, but you're actually able to make a mindful decision around the foods that you're like, okay, I'm going to eat a generally balanced meal because I know at this point in time it's going to be better suited for the rest of my day or the rest of the things I have to do. And then normally, if you're not in that urgent state, you can stop when you're full, whether that's at a 6 or maybe at a 7. Whatever that means to you, you can stop, and you're not going to blow past all those places and all of a sudden end up really, really full and uncomfortable. And then when you're in that space of not feeling really full and uncomfortable and not feeling really guilty about the food that you make, you can actually most likely make a more mindful decision of, oh, it's time for me to eat again. So I think that this tool on the hunger scale is really, really powerful to start to tap into, to start to understand all of the other nuances of hunger that you may or may not have. Know that I find that most people end up on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's a 1 or 2 or a 9 or 10, end up being really tired and really fatigued as well. And so to really stay energized and feel good and able to function mentally and physically throughout the day, it does stand in our best interest to fuel our bodies well and to fuel ourselves with food that are going to help stay within those ranges and not have these huge hops back and forth. Also, I think this can give people a lot of permission to eat, because you don't want to give yourself only permission to eat when you're at a 2, because we know what generally happens. So give yourself permission to eat. Allow yourself to know that hunger is not black and white, and that there's a lot of spaces in between here. And know that it sometimes takes a while for our body to register that it's full. So I do recommend sometimes to actually sit with your food and be with your food for maybe even 15 minutes, especially if you're a really fast eater. Try to stay with your food for maybe 15 minutes, maybe it's even longer than that, because it can take a while for our body and our brain to totally catch up with each other, to actually be like, oh, I'm full, we're good, we're not in this urgent state anymore. So let me know if you have any questions or comments on this. I would love to answer them and love to dive a little bit deeper into this, but I encourage you to try to write down your own hunger scale and start to identify that throughout even a week. I don't think, because you won't experience the spectrum in a day most likely, but trying to take a week to really identify with, what does this feel like in my body? So again, reach out if you have questions, and thanks for tuning in.